everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, we had snow today.
Oh yes, we had a light dusting, not enough to even stick to the ground. And it is not unheard of to have snow on Easter in Michigan.
The average last day of snow has been the middle of April,
Yes.
but it depends where in Michigan because I know that in the UP they get snow in June.
Well, that's an aberration, but yeah, it's happened.
Yes. Um,
That's a record. That's a record too, by the way.
so anyway, so given that, I thought we should talk about something that is would shed some light and maybe some heat on the current situation.
Like, what do you use for eyes for snowmen anymore, since you can't really get coal easily?
Well,
I mean, these are the
solar
tough
solar
questions.
panels, little solar panels. So
Oh, okay.
LEDs.
Oh, that's great. Battery powered.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice. See, these are the tough questions of our time that this
yeah.
blog tries to tackle.
Well, and actually we're dealing with a rather potentially fraught subject today, moral narcissism.
Well, I think before we tackle that question, we should work up to it with a somewhat easier question.
Oh, what would that be?
Well, we like to ask this question as a way of getting into other questions.
Yes.
What are you drinking tonight?
Oh, well, I happen to have it's called a penicillin.
Oh, all
And
right.
this version of a penicillin,
Here's what ails you.
yeah, penicillin typically is scotch and a ginger syrup. This particular one, I'm using scotch, a little honey syrup, some lemon juice, and a syrup from Lieber and Company. They make some great cocktail syrups. This one's called fiery ginger syrup. So
Is
it's
that what's
actually
is that what's giving you
spicy.
that lemony color?
It's yeah, that and the yeah, lemon juice and so on. It's the fiery ginger has heat to it.
Hmm.
So it's really quite good.
I, I
And,
would
and
I would have taken that for a lemon drop because of its color almost.
yeah, but it's got more lemon drops can be kind of it's just getting hit with a lemon covered brick, if you recall,
Yeah.
Jagger's Guide to the Galaxy. There's more to this, more depth to this, particularly with the fiery ginger syrup.
I'm
Um, and
have
the
to
honey syrup adds sweetness, but also flavor that just a straight simple syrup doesn't. So
I might have to get my hands on some of that fiery ginger
that's
stuff.
that's quite good.
I've
Um,
also got, as it happens, a ginger cocktail with but it's more the usual. It is a bourbon Wolcott Brickford Reserve by the company that makes 1782, which is another favorite of mine,
oh, okay,
with some orange bitters and the Fever Tree ginger beer that we keep in stock here at home.
nice, nice. Well, sure. Hmm.
All right. Moral
Yeah,
narcissism.
moral narcissism. So this, like a lot of our discussions, require starting with some definitions. But
Yeah, I want to make it very clear that what we're talking about is not narcissism that has a level of that has some morality to it. It's not
no,
moral in this case is not of adjective.
right. It is um a lot of people talked about virtue signaling. And virtue signaling, I sort of have to explain that to get to moral narcissism, I think.
It's more, you know what I think it should more accurately be termed narcissistic morality.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. The virtue signaling is essentially saying you're good but not actually doing anything by showing your
Right.
favor or disgust for certain ideas, but you don't actually do anything about it. So you're signaling virtuous, right? And we talk about the knightly virtues. Um, Moral narcissism is taking that further and weaponizing the cause to punish those who disagree with you, essentially. It's the motivation behind the act and action of virtue signaling.
Well, I see virtual virtue signaling as its own thing in that you might, in fact, be doing those things, but you have to make sure everybody knows it.
But yeah,
You
yeah,
may be acting, you may be donating to the right things, and you may actually believe in the cause that you're supporting, but you have to announce the fact at every opportunity to increase your status within
yes.
whatever sort of group you're trying to impress.
And if you remember the episode we did on charity,
Yes.
the types of giving, the highest level of giving was, according to the sages, was anonymous.
Yes.
You give it anonymously, you don't know who it's going to, and you don't take credit for it, and that's the highest level. Whereas um virtue signaling, as you said, can be it's there are a couple levels to it. It's the talking about stuff but not actually doing anything,
Right.
or doing something but making sure everybody knows about it, right?
Well, and talking about it without doing anything is akin to hypocrisy.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, and there are, over the years, many people have said, have spoken about or said some version of deeds, not words.
yeah, right.
The suffragettes, that was the motto, deeds, not words. Quit talking about it. Let's do something. Gandhi said a version of that. Confucius said, a gentleman would be ashamed should his deeds not match his words.
Right.
And my own personal motto is words and deeds in accord. Your words and your deeds should
Hmm.
align. Um, and so the so that's virtue signaling, but narcissistic moralism is when you are you're proclaiming your values, that you are being what your values are, no matter what. It's you're saying you believe in this thing because you think it's good, no matter the harm it causes.
Right.
So it's the opposite of altruism, which is doing good without causing harm. Moral narcissism is doing what you think is good, no matter who it harms.
And yes, it's narcissistic in that I am taking this position because it makes me feel good,
Right,
and I don't care that it harms people, as you
right,
said.
right,
The a component of that is I'm adopting this stand because it makes me feel better. It puts me in a morally superior position.
right. And it may not actually accomplish anything,
Sure.
except to, well, you become part of the group that you're identifying with.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's another aspect of the narcissism in that if you disagree with the dogma of a particular group, you're outcast from that. So you say what they want, you agree with them, you convince yourself to agree with them, so you're part of that. You feel that
Right.
being part of that group, right? Um,
I think we are seeing that in our politics more and more. We were talking just before we went on, but you were saying purity is becoming a demand of both the left and the right. You
Yes.
you can't merely think this thing is good. You must adopt all of our standards, or you must take up all of these causes to be considered a true conservative or a true liberal.
Yes.
You have to be on board with everything, and you have to support it absolutely.
And yeah, and no disagreement on anything.
Right.
Otherwise, you're outcast from, you're not pure enough. And that,
Right. You're the problem. If you're not part of, this is if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
yes.
If you're not with
And
us, you are against us.
um, you and I both value independent thought,
Yes.
that we may arrive at the same conclusion in different ways based on evidence, but we may disagree. But the idea that you cannot disagree about things without being being considered evil by the other people
Right.
who it has to be purity. 99% isn't good enough, an agreement. If it's not 100%, you're out. And we've seen that in like candidates who disagreed with one particular thing and were primaried out of their office by somebody who was more pure in
Right.
in adhering to the party line. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and we also briefly touched on centrism,
Yeah.
and that's its own kind of narcissism, saying I'm not going to take a side in.
Well, I think calling oneself a centrist is difficult. I mean, uh, it's hard to carve out a third space that wants to call itself centrist, because what platform or what campaign would a centrist campaign look like? Is it, one from column A and one from column B? Is it, what does that mean? You if it's a evidence-based reasonable compromise is your policy, that's that makes a lot of sense, and
Yeah,
where most
well,
parties were, but that's not a central position.
yes. So if one side says we want to take away this right, and the other side says we don't want to take away this right, a centrist position that, well, we'll limit the right a little bit, or we'll only take away some of your rights and not all. I mean, it is, that's not compromise. That's not center. That's not rational. It's, and it's narcissistic because it's saying, look at me. It's performative too. Look at me, how how
Look at a rebel. I'm a rebel.
not, I'm a rebel by not agreeing with anybody, by not being judgmental, by taking no position, by taking all positions or none. It's um yeah, it's like Groucho Marx's song, whatever it is, I'm against it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there, but like I'm saying, I think that one can reasonably say, I am liberal, but everything has to be judged against some sort of reasonable standard. Um,
and that's why, and we talked about this early on when we talked about our philosophies, our personal philosophies. I said I'm an ethical pragmatist.
right.
So what works, what functionally works, what's a pragmatic, practical, implementable, actionable, effective solution to achieve ethical ends. Ethics being the good of everyone, the means by which we all cooperate in a society those sorts of things, not benefiting only a small percentage of people at the detriment of others. Ethical pragmatism. And that means that sometimes I agree with a variety of different people,
Right.
but I have a guiding philosophy by which I evaluate policies and um, and results. And I think it's similar to yours, the of the social contract.
Right.
And
I,
it's
yeah, and for mine, the social contract is basically it's about cooperative existence
yes,
in, at its base, right? We're trying to do the most good for the most people. There's, however, I read an interesting article today that was coming from a conservative uh, position, I think, where they talked about the difference between originalism in the law
hmm
and they couched as mere positivism. And their thesis was kind of that lawmakers aren't there to do the will of the people. They are there to look at the law, make sure the law is the best for everyone, and then enforce it. The hard part is who decides what's best,
yeah,
right? There's a
yeah,
whole democratic slice there that's left out of this kind of thinking. Because of course, your side knows what's best. Your side has the Bible behind it, or whatever book of rules that you have particularly been indoctrinated to is clearly the way things should be. So the role of law and legislation is not to find the best idea amongst all of the ideas available, is to say it's to go back and look and say, look, there's the correct idea, originalism, constitutionalism,
right.
fundamental in that way, that here's the original idea. It's clearly best because it was first. So we're going to enforce this law.
Yeah. That and even the writers of the founding documents set they wrote in the ability to amend it, to change it.
Well, and that was the focus of this article, the direction that I felt like it was going. And I'll read these weird stuff just to kind of see what's percolating in the brains of some of these people. But it was the idea that the question posed at the very beginning was, is originalism enough anymore to save the country? So it's originalism wasn't even enough. We have to go back past the Constitution and decide what they really actually meant, and then write laws based on that. And that's
Now what they actually wrote.
not what they actually wrote, but what they meant when they wrote it. And the yeah, originalism obviously isn't enough anymore
Well,
because
in original, the problem with the adherence of originalism is that they interpret what was written according to what they think was meant by it. They're already doing that.
exactly. And
And
when even the founders said, considered this document, Jefferson himself expected the Constitution to be torn up and thrown away in 20 years.
yeah, yeah.
And something greater minds would come along. They all believed that.
Corporations were also limited to a lifespan of 10 years. Then they had to be disbanded and a new corporation formed.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Um, and it's similar. I mean, this comes back to the idea that what you claim to believe or say you believe, rather than what you do or how you act or what the results of your actions are, defines you as a person and makes you good. And so what you say you believe makes you good, not what you do. And that's this narcissistic moralism. I proclaim that, I'm a good person because I do this and I say these things, I proclaim these things, then I go off and do whatever I want, but I'm saying the right things. Therefore, it's again, it comes back to hypocrisy, like we've talked about so often. So many things do. Um,
Yes. Now,
Words and deeds, both together.
I think there is, however, and why I I think of myself as conservative. I always have thought of myself as fairly conservative, but I find myself drawn further and further to the liberal, I don't want to call it agenda or whatever, uh, because there's a large gaping hole of hypocrisy on the right. This is what I see.
Yeah.
Now, however, as I get as I get closer and closer to the left, I'm purity keeps being demanded of me, and all you can really do is say, well, I don't, I'm not sure I buy all of that, but but, and this is to me the thing, like I'm not, I can't support that because I don't get that. I don't understand whatever this thing. I don't get it. I don't. It doesn't quite make sense to me based on my experience and knowledge and the evidence presented. But it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter.
Mm.
You're what you are asking for is just equal rights, for instance, or you just want to be able to do a thing yourself that it doesn't affect anybody but you. Fine, go do it. I don't care.
Mm.
Do whatever you want. To me, that's but to we have this Christian nationalist movement that is swamping conservatism, and the conservatives, the old conservatives, were about your personal rights and no one infringing on
I,
them.
President Eisenhower would be considered a liberal today.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Spending money on public works instead of
yeah,
giving companies a tax break. What?
yeah, exactly. Um, and um, but the purity test, any purity test, is 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 problematic because unless you believe exactly everything and adhere exactly, you're going to be sent to a re-education camp.
Right.
You will learn it's it's for particularly for people who believe themselves to be nonconformist and free thinkers, to be conforming to thought without their own analysis, without arriving at a similar conclusion or a different one, without their own thinking, their own analysis, um, simply parroting slogans. Um, and
Or
and I'm I understand why the appeal of centrism, because it's people saying a pox on both your houses, right?
yeah, right.
Except centrists are saying, look at me. I'm so great because I'm here. It's not just doing the thing, but having to show off that you're doing the thing. It's very performative. So,
Yeah, right. And we've talked about this, or I've talked about this before, that I'm not in general a joiner of anything, any kind of stripe. I mean, I
that's why your
don't,
furniture keeps falling apart.
yeah, right. um, I'm
See,
not,
there's the old definition of
I know,
joiner, meaning
joiner,
that,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you
okay.
so much. I almost missed it,
Yeah,
like so
yeah.
many other,
I had to demonstrate that my knowledge of the
right,
subject was
very
superior.
performative.
Right. Thank you.
But the
And by doing so, I was demonstrating the definition of,
of pedantry. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I don't understand fan clubs. I don't understand any of that stuff. So I could no more call myself a centrist than I could really call myself a Democrat or a Republican or a Green Party or any of those things. I'm not any of those things. I refuse to identify myself as one of those things because it requires the adoption of a whole set of things that I may or may not agree with. And you can't say, well, I'm like 8 out of 10. I'm down for you guys. I'm 8 out of 10 for your stuff. And if that's the way we've got to start picking our politics now.
Well, pol elections, people think elections are a fan club, but
Right.
it's a chess move because you're actually trying to make a move. Sometimes in chess, you're making a move to block the other guy,
Right.
from taking an offensive action against you. Sometimes you're trying to gain position. It's it's chess. I mean, it's clear that the next election, like the last one, was about the overriding issue is about democracy, is about
It's
whether or not the country will remain. Um,
and see, this is
you know,
your chess
and I
analogy.
don't think that's hyperbole, really.
I hope it is, but
Yeah,
but you can't not take that seriously,
right.
given given much of the rhetoric that we
Yeah,
hear coming from one side. But
yes.
the your chess analogy, I think, is interesting as a political analogy in that, yeah, it is a chess move, but in chess, the object is to overcome and destroy the other side altogether.
Yeah, and that's where the analogy falls apart.
If there was such a game, if there was a game like that, the idea was to keep as many pieces on the board as possible, and you're both trying to make moves to do that, and the other side is trying to stop you.
Yeah.
That maybe that's a better analogy for the game, but we don't have games like that. Games are competitions. Games are
Yeah,
win.
there it's is there such a cooperative game where you're actually, well, I think most games pit
Yeah,
sides
of course.
against their sides.
There's a
Even,
winner and a loser.
I mean, the first thing that occurred to me was like role-playing games, like uh, tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, where
Mhm.
you are a team and you're collaborating, you're helping each other,
Right.
but you encounter enemies and you often have to destroy them. If there was a game where no, your goal is to make allies and to grow and to do things like that would be a different kind of game. Maybe there is such a game out there like that. I don't know. Where
But would it be any fun? So
well, most storytelling has good guys and bad guys.
yeah, well, in fact, there's a game. It's a party game. I think I've showed it to you. It's based around the adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Oh, yeah,
And yet it's a party game in that you you you're basically challenging someone to tell a story like Baron Munchausen. You're giving them you give them this tiny premise, right, as part of the game, and then they are then required to knit this incredibly unrealistic story around it. And everyone in the game can offer a question or something about your adventure, and then you're supposed to include that and elaborate on it based on that. And you go around and it takes turns. You got to have the right group of people to play this game, I think.
that
But
sounds like the way I tell stories anyway.
well, and that's why I picked it up. It's just a
Yeah.
book that says here's and it's written in the voice of Baron Munchausen, so it's
Yeah.
hilarious just to read it.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I'll let you borrow it sometime. But yeah, so getting back, we are in this kind of a position where both sides in politics, we are both sides are telling their adherents that the other side is an existential threat.
Yes, they are doing that.
And I don't, I want, part of me wants to believe it's hyperbole. There's, but you hear the language from one side, and it's, you know, and it's not just new. This has been a sort of underlying
Yeah.
rhetoric of we have to take this back for ourselves, or we will never be able to dominate again. We're losing our grip on the country, and it's becoming Sodom and Gomorrah, and we're if we don't wrest control and take control and tell these people how to live, everything's going to hell in a handbasket.
Yep.
And the other side, both sides are basically saying the same thing. If we don't take control of this ourselves, we'll never be able to do it. It's all going to go away, and we're going to be in chains, and all of our rights will be trampled into the dust, and it's going to be this small group of people telling us how to live.
I
And
come back to what is there validity to the claim? What evidence supports what people are saying? What are people telling you? When somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Who's telling you who they are? And can you believe them? And what evidence is there to support that? And
yeah, this is what I mean by the hypocrisy of the right of
yeah,
they're gonna take away all of our rights. When in the last 40
for
years,
our own good, right?
well, yes, of course. Well, both sides say it's for your
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
But in the last 40 years, every single right that has been rescinded or taken away from us has come from the right. For
yeah.
all of their claim that all we want is to have our rights protected and be left alone, it is they who are restricting and
But they're restricting the rights of other people.
well, exactly.
It's never their own, right?
Right.
It,
Well, our rights are enshrined in this document. It says right here, these are our rights, and we will interpret them exactly the way this book over here says.
yes.
And that's my problem. It all goes back to some book that all of us haven't agreed on is a real book. You got
Huh. Yeah. I again, I think there's an attitude of moral superiority, and lots of people express the attitude of moral superiority. And it's doing so, saying my morality is superior to yours, is narcissistic,
yes.
because it's morality, and this is why I distinguish between morality and ethics. Ethics, the rules by which we cooperatively live as a society, that's ethics.
Hmm.
You don't steal from other people, you don't kill other people, you don't cheat in business, you don't, all those cooperative things that people evolved to do. People
Right.
evolved to be cooperative societies because it was just increased their chances of survival.
Right.
Morality is private decision making, private behavior. Do you drink? Do you gamble? Do you cheat at solitaire? Do whatever? Things that you decide for yourself about whether or not something you should do, but they don't affect other people.
Well, I don't know. I think morality can come into you know harming someone, harming others. That's certainly a question of morality. It is
Well,
not.
but it's a violation of ethics to harm other people.
Oh, well, okay, that's where you're slicing it. I see.
Where
Yeah.
that's, well, I got to slice it somewhere, so that's where I'm slicing it, and I slice it. I have to slice it somewhere so that there's a clarity about what decisions people make about their own conduct that doesn't affect me, or that does affect me, and that's why I decided I draw the line there between morality and ethics. And that's one definition. There are a lot of definitions, ways people define it. That for me is a functional definition that works for the purpose of defining ethical pragmatism. Uh,
Right. Sure.
and in this case, for the purpose of defining uh, narcissistic morality, because it's not enough to say, I choose this as the way I will live, as the way I behave. You have to tell other people about it, and you will actually say, well, if you don't do it, conform to the way I choose, then you're wrong, and I'm going to, I'm going to stop you. Now you're violating their rights to make their own decisions.
Right. So that for you, that's where it becomes unethical.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So now, if somebody is behaving in a way that harms the general good or harms themselves, I think that we have an ethical responsibility to keep people from harming themselves, which you might
Well,
say is their moral decision. But people harming themselves uh, imposes a cost on the society.
but this is the argument, this is the religious argument that this thing you are doing, which affects no one but you, is immoral and therefore undermining the moral and ethical fiber of society. This
Yeah,
is the argument.
but I'm not saying that it should be stopped. Your private behavior should be stopped because it's immoral. But
I know you're not, but
right,
your argument is being used
yes,
by one side or the other, and because but they're using a removed morality, right? Their
yeah,
morality is based on something outside of societal good.
yes.
It
Well,
is arbitrary morality.
or societal harm. So
Okay.
there's if if um, someone can drink but they can't drive drunk
Right.
because right. But if someone drinks and they harm themselves drinking, there's a cost in the medical system. There's a cost in treatment. There's a cost to the people who have to care for them, or they are supposed to care for. There's a lot of costs. So they should be offered help, not harm for that. So that's why, for example, um, drug treatment is more effective than drug
In
punishment, for
in
example,
general, yes.
in general. That's why a housing first program to help people deal with homelessness is more effective than any other thing,
Well, and
any other version.
our I'll say our justice system recognizes the difference between a user
Yeah.
and or an addict or a user or whatever and a distributor, a seller. That the user is harming themselves. We've made and I think that the opening up of marijuana laws is really was a turn that the country needed to make. Just for that reason, is that you're what you do for and to yourself is up to you until it affects society.
Right. Yep.
However, if you are selling something to somebody, you are causing the harm to society. You are a
Well, and
direct cause of harm to society.
given the whole supply chain and where the money goes and all of that, you're also there. It's not just the people who are buying and harming themselves potentially. It's the harm it does because of the economic transactions and the
Sure.
crime up and down the line. Um, at the federal level, cannabis has not been decriminalized, let alone legalized. So that
Well,
still needs to
yes,
be dealt with.
yes.
And it's not the now it's state by state. That's another thing that drives me crazy. The state by state differences in each state in things that really should be consistent across the country.
Well,
Um,
we talked about that. We talked about that in the past too. That and this is another thing where people go back to the founders, and I, I believe, and I think it can be easily uh, uh, backed up that the founders saw us as a country more like the European Union, where there's each state is its own sort of cultural bastion, and they are cooperative and they have interstate commerce and they provide a common defense. That's right there in the Constitution, right? We are there is a they each state is required to defend each other state from foreign invasion. That's part of the agreement they're in. But Pennsylvania has its own sort of unofficial state religion, and Massachusetts has its own. And you know, this was something that the founders recognized and not didn't exactly encourage. It took a long time for us to get around to saying, giving the federal government enough power to say, no, you can't impose your religion on everyone in your state.
yeah, the remember the first iteration was the Articles of Confederation, and that
Yeah.
didn't work because the federal government was too weak. And then the Constitution, and then eventually under the Constitution, it moved to a uh, more power in the federal government than before, but the states still have a power. And
Well, yeah, it
that
was.
those jurisdictional issues have been in flux over time and landed where they are. But one example, um, some people I talked to, some people um, from Great Britain, and they were astonished that there was no national driver's license in the
Yeah.
United States. And yeah, it's frankly it's absurd that and having lived in several different states now, I can tell you that getting a new driver's license and getting plates is incredibly cumbersome. It's
Hmm.
not enough to already have a license and a passport. You have to produce a birth certificate. You have to do, and there were some places where you have to go one place for your license and another place for your plates.
Yeah.
And it's all profit driven. The counties, by the counties
Yeah.
and the states, it's absurd. There should be a national driver's license. I think there should be only two time zones in the country, and we should and people should get off my lawn, right?
Well, I agree that people should get off your lawn.
Yeah,
Um,
nobody's on my lawn anyway.
yeah, good, lucky for them.
Yeah,
But yeah, so well, I mean, the Bill of Rights was was a big thing. The Bill of Rights was important because it was
yeah,
this is for every citizen in this country, and many state representatives fought against it.
yeah,
Um, we the Senate exists so that the entity of a state has representative has a representation in the government. I think we made a horrible mistake when we didn't make it. I think our legislators took power into their hands and capped the House of Representatives. I think that
yeah,
was a problem. A lot of things we can go back and look at, but the idea of a strong federal government that ensures the rights of every citizen of the country was kind of a radical idea when the Constitution was written, and the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, remember, is a separate document.
Well, that's the first 10 amendments to the
Well,
Constitution.
yes, but it is not technically part of the Constitution. It
The
is
amendments are part of the Constitution.
they're they are by an amendment by. I mean,
Yes, it's an
it's
addition
something
to, but
right.
taken as a whole, it's the Constitution and the amendments.
Yes,
We're saying the same thing in a different way.
right. So this and I now I kind of lost where we were as far as what we're talking about with states' rights and the ability to impose state.
It was really after the Civil War that the federal government started becoming more of the entity it is now. Um,
Yeah, well, it had to.
yeah, yeah,
So we so again, this is where I've kind of lost the train of where we were with the narcissistic morality.
yes. Well, and let's get we can. I mean, so much virtue signaling is evident in the public sphere, particularly with social media. There's even a term, um, click activism, click activism, slacktivism,
Activism. Yeah, I've
where,
yeah.
right, where, you know, oh, I liked something, therefore, I'm virtuous.
Yeah.
Look at look at how many likes I got, for saying this thing. So,
Or I'm out there liking stuff. That's my support. That's how I'm
right,
showing support for
right.
this. Yeah. You know, this is a little this is a little tangential, and I know we don't do that very often. But I saw this woman who couldn't have been more like in her late 30s, or maybe she was a well-preserved early 40s. But she was talking about how tough she had it as a child and all of her, she came home and she was a latchkey kid and our parents, did this and that. I said, how old? You cannot possibly be old enough to remember the things you're talking about. You're just taking this sort of stance of, this new generation is so weak, my generation, but she's talking about the stuff that my generation went through. And she is at least one, maybe two generations behind.
Yeah.
Like, what moral high ground are you attempting to climb up onto here, sweetheart? I mean, that's I was like, I'm watching it in confusion. Like I know you could be an offspring of somebody in my generation, of my age. You're not old enough to be claiming this moral high ground.
Yeah, I think that it's uh, social media. Oh,
Social media is the devil.
it's
I
such
said it 20 years ago, and it's more true now than it was then.
it's such a shame that um I mean the people who believed that the internet would give us access to all the world's knowledge and enable connection between people in a way that how optimistic and naive
Yeah.
that it I think there is no invention that doesn't have the potential to be corrupted for
Well,
if not for a nefarious purpose, for a banal one. So
yeah, but yeah, banality is really
yeah.
the defining feature of social media, really.
Well, and that's people often talk about 1984 and George Orwell, but I think in a lot more ways we're much more like
Oh,
Huxley's
yeah.
vision, because Orwell said that the truth will be kept from you. Whereas Huxley said the truth will be there. It'll just be buried in a sea of irrelevancies.
Yep.
I think um, I think Orwell was right when he talked about newspeak and people using words to mean things other than what they actually mean. But I think Huxley's vision of the future was closer to what it became. I
Well,
think.
and I,
So,
yeah, and I see in Orwell's thing currently the kind of idea that if you're not if you're not current with the jargon, you're somehow unworthy of attention.
yeah,
You have to be constantly up on the jargon to maintain a voice.
yeah. Um, I, I, there's certainly been a number of science fiction stories, movies, books where set sometime in the future, people are speaking some kind of newer jargon,
Mhm.
and the author always has the challenge of making it different enough but clear from context what it is that they're saying. Um, but a lot of jargon and language evolves, and I understand that language evolves, and we speak a version of English now that would be unrecognizable to people
Sure.
in hundreds, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But the same will probably be true. I think less likely to be true hundreds of years from now because of the media recordings and media availability that will be people will watch. Um,
Well,
but
I also think there is a I think that people say, well, language evolved over 400 years. There wasn't centralized education 400 years ago either.
yeah, yeah,
You know, the rules that we learn in elementary school just didn't exist.
yeah.
You
Well,
know,
regional accents are disappearing too.
yeah.
Um,
Well, then that makes a certain amount of sense given our ability to travel and our ability to communicate over long distances.
yeah.
You can
Um,
relocate now at almost a moment's notice. This is this goes to when we talk about back to the founding fathers again, and that uh, they had no concept of our mobility or the kind of population densities that we take for granted.
yeah.
They could not envision them. They could not envision being more than a day's travel from fresh produce.
They, there are states now. They also would not have imagined that the governor of one state would want to limit the ability of their citizens to travel freely to another state.
Right. Sure.
And that's actually being attempted now and is a clear violation of the Constitution
Yes,
on the
absolutely.
face of it. Um, so people have the right to travel freely for whatever reason. Um, so
Yep.
without having to show their papers or justify where they're going.
And it's always been possible years ago, right? When the drinking age was all over the kind of sometimes it was 18 and sometimes it was
Yeah.
21. There was absolutely nothing that could be done about a 19-year-old traveling from a state where the drinking age was 21, going to another state where it was 18 and drinking and
Yes.
going back. There was
They
absolutely no way to
the only
enforce.
thing that they would do, and I recall this because from a state where it was 21, going to college in a state where it was 19,
Yep.
and the next to another state where it was 18, I recall that on the border. There were bars on one side of the border and there were cops on the other waiting for people to come back
Oh, sure.
and busting them. So
But that's
that's what they did, but they couldn't stop them from traveling,
right. And they didn't arrest them for drinking. They arrested them for being drunk in public.
being drunk and driving. Yeah.
Well, yeah, right. Okay. Or if they were driving, certainly. But if they would
Yes.
unload the whole car and check everybody to see if they were drunk. And
Yeah.
if they were drunk, they got a citation for being drunk in public. They weren't in public until the car was stopped.
Right.
But that's kind of a technicality that wasn't a big deal then. But and we're talking about abortion now,
Yeah.
right? So you can't state some what, like 4 states now are trying to pass laws. Texas has already done it, but other states are trying to pass laws that say you can't leave your state to get this procedure in another state where it's legal. And they're
It's a
trying to
violation of the
arrest,
Constitution. I mean, it so obviously
right.
is.
And you can't. This is gets into ex post facto law, and that you can't arrest someone for having done a thing where it was legal
Right.
in your state where it wasn't.
Right.
You can't arrest someone for no longer being pregnant. That's not a crime.
They're trying to make it a crime. But
Well, they're trying
but
to make
again, it comes back to, and this is the case in politicians too. It's not necessarily that they believe what they're saying, but they
right,
express these certain extreme moral views in order to appeal to people who will vote for them.
right.
Because,
Well, they know it's a sure thing.
yeah,
That's I think what it is. It's aimed at an absolute sure vote.
yeah,
Rather than taking a sort of, as we've been talking about, a sort of reasonable ethical stand and saying, here's all the, a politician coming forward and saying, here's all the evidence and citing the different studies. And this is where this is what I've decided. Well, no, that's not good enough. You need to be holding this party line.
right,
This is the goal. This is the goal of our party, not of your constituents, our party.
right. I think we've gone round and round about this, and enough so that I really want to have another drink because it's depressing.
Well, it is. But part of our purpose, as we have said before, is not just to vent our own frustrations, but to let other people know and maybe give them ammunition that they didn't have
Right.
when they're in discussion with somebody. So,
I I will continue to encourage people to think independently, evaluate evidence for its credibility,
yeah.
use credible evidence to reach their own conclusions, and in doing so, agree with me.
Well,
Yeah.
in
And
the
in
end,
doing so, and even if they disagree with me, I if I don't want to be just surrounded with people who agree with me, but I want people to have have reached a conclusion thoughtfully based on consideration of credible evidence and a logical path to reach that conclusion, not simply to echo what someone else has told them to believe.
right, yeah.
And if somebody does that and disagrees with me, we have the basis for a conversation. We have the basis for a discussion, and maybe we can learn something from each other.
And we have, this is another, there's a humility in being willing to change your mind. And both of us have changed our positions on things over the years, and I think that people see this now, unfortunately, view having a discussion and finding new evidence and being unable to refute that evidence but yet somehow being unable to change their mind. They think that it's a weakness. If I change my mind, it means I was wrong, and that's a weakness. but it's okay to be wrong. We, Bertrand Russell, one of my favorite philosophers, said, I would never stake my life on my beliefs because I might be wrong.
Mhm.
You know, that's, and we revere people who give their lives for their beliefs. That's not evidence. That's not,
Right.
I would stake my life on this scientific evidence. Well, scientists won't do that either because
Yeah.
they know.
Yeah. It, we're always learning more, or we're stagnant. And
Right.
if we learn more, then our thinking reasonably could change
Mhm.
with new evidence. And that is what science is. Science is evaluating new evidence and gathering new evidence and improving what people
Right.
think. Um, I I paint, and
Mhm.
I have changed some of my techniques and methods based on evidence, based on information. So when I was learning, I was taught certain ways to do things that were handed down and very traditional. And then I have learned things from scientific conservators who say, here's what will happen. Here's the problems that these traditional methods cause if you want the work to last.
Uh-huh.
And so I've changed. It's like, oh, okay, doing that, I can get the same or better results that will actually be more durable, last longer, not have problems if I switch to these methods. Well, okay, but in even in the some forums I'm in where the discuss painting and such, there are people say, well, this is the way I learned to do it, and it hasn't been a problem, for the years I've been doing it. Yeah, but we're talking about the longevity of something over
Yeah.
past your lifetime. So, well, I don't care about that. Well, okay, then do what you're doing. But some of us do care about that because that's actually the original tradition, is to do things to make work that would remain.
Right.
So,
So it's
so
legacy.
yeah,
Well, we both in our combat sports have figured out or have seen poor technique that just causes injury.
yes,
And some guys they'll go get the injury fixed, or they'll go get a surgery and go back to doing the same thing they were doing before because it was effective in the short run.
yeah,
And you know, I was fairly lucky, and I got good instruction at the beginning of how
mm,
to not, or at least I was told, find a way that doesn't hurt you to do this.
yes,
That has always been my philosophy, that you fight in a way that's natural and sustainable.
yeah,
There's plenty of techniques out there that are effective, but will over the long run cause an injury that will shorten your career.
yeah, yeah.
So
And it's just the um, damage from the sport itself, the equipment and the movement and stuff. Even if you're doing everything right, that can build up. And why we know more now than we did um, when we started, but there are people who still value their own experience over the evidence and experience of others. So,
right,
and
right.
that's a kind of narcissism, which brings us back to where we were. So,
So it's a good place to wrap up.
yeah, I think so.
Back where we started.
Yeah. Improvising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then that's going to be it. We're going to say goodbye. Thank you again for showing up, everyone. Uh, till we see you again, like, share, friend us, do all the things.
Do all the things.
Send us send us topics.
Yeah,
We we just gave away a lovely T-shirt to our friend Toby. That's gone out. She probably has it by the time this is published. She probably has it in her hands right now.
probably. Yeah.
But so do those things and be thou
A good night.
and true.